Video games are great at showing far-off worlds and introducing us to cool fantasy characters. But sometimes you just want to play a regular guy with a normal job. That's a good way to describe Bouncer Story, the debut release from Finnish developer Helmi Games. It's a work simulator where you check IDs and shoo off drunk people, all while attempting to stay on the good side of the local mafia. It may not have fantasy characters from far-off worlds, but Bouncer Story delivers a tense and exciting story about a regular guy who gets in way over his head. Right, not to state the obvious here, but this is the story of a bouncer. He doesn't have much money or experience, but decides to take a part-time job checking IDs at 12 Blues, a little dive bar on the wrong side of town. This probably should have been the first clue that a late-night blackjack game was a bad idea. But he goes anyway and wakes up with a pounding headache and almost no recollection of what happened. Unfortunately, it's actually worse than that, because he now owes a lot of money to the local mafia. Now he's forced to work as a bouncer at a number of different clubs around the city in an effort to pay back his debts. As a game, Bouncer Story reminds me a lot of the 2013 indie hit Papers, Please. It's a game where you have to decide who gets into the bar and who gets turned away. You earn money for every person that you let in, but you have to be careful, because your wages will be docked if you're not thorough enough. This starts out simple enough, with our hero doing little more than turning away drunk people. You can tell they're drunk based on what they say and the spelling errors in their dialogue, which makes the job feel a lot like being a copy editor. Obviously, his job doesn't stay that easy for long, as the bars will start requiring more scrutiny. He'll need to start checking IDs to make sure the people in line are old enough to get in, which is made even more complicated when he has to start dealing with stolen cards and fake information. He'll need to keep an eye on the pictures to make sure they line up and carefully check the names, all while making sure to abide by the no-entry list that was sent down by each of the bars and clubs. Letting in underage kids, drunks, and those deemed undesirable will cut into the money you make each night, which only makes paying back those gangsters that much harder. Thankfully, we can spend some of that excess money on upgrades, including charisma, intelligence, and strength. Pumping money into charisma will open up the map, giving the bouncer more opportunities around the city. The intelligence, on the other hand, will make it easier to spot drunk people and even increase your daily payout. But as tempting as it is to dump all your money into these two upgrades, you don't want to neglect the strength, which will make you a better fighter. You'll find out that people are a lot more punchy in the later levels. And the last thing you want is to get knocked out when you're working. That's bad form. On one hand, this is a game about checking IDs and making money. But as the title suggests, Bouncer's Story is also about the narrative. What I like about this game is how it effortlessly weaves in different story elements, often making you decide what the bouncer will do. Will he help the investigation as they try to track down a string of local murders? Will he get in good with the mafia? Will he choose not to pay off his gambling debts? You have a lot of control over how the story unfolds, giving the player quite a bit of incentive to go through it a few different times. That said, I do wish there was a little bit more to the story. I like the different choices you get to make, but there just isn't a lot of meat on the bone. You get a few lines of dialogue and maybe a news update, and that's about it. I wish this part of the game was fleshed out a bit more, since it ends up being one of the more interesting aspects of the bouncer's journey, especially towards the end. The thing is that this criticism feeds right into the other problem I have with the game, which is the repetition. Even with the added scrutiny, you'll start to notice that every level kind of feels the same. It doesn't help that you're only saying yes or no to a handful of potential customers. So it's common to have a screen filled with the same characters wearing the same outfits. There's just not enough variety here, which is true of the game at large. You can work at a bunch of different bars and clubs, but the only incentive for jumping around is to see different backgrounds. It's not even like you're earning more money for working the harder venues, which is a real mistake. It would have been fun to see the different bars have their own unique stories, but there's nothing like that here. There are some other minor issues with Bouncer's story, such as confusing menus that don't always tell you what you need to know, and a hero who always looks and dresses the same. But look, these aren't the types of problems that'll get in the way of the fun. Even if it is a little repetitive, I kept going back to see how the different stories played out, and because checking IDs is surprisingly entertaining. Who knows? Maybe I missed my calling by not working as a bouncer. I guess we'll never know. Who knew that standing outside a bar could be this much fun? Bouncer's story is not just an enjoyable take on the Papers, Please concept, but is also an engaging work of interactive fiction. While the storytelling is a little simplistic and they definitely needed to draw a few more customers, there's just something about the gameplay and the mafia story that kept me coming back for more. Bouncer's story is a good game that I have no problem recommending, even if it needs a little bit more meat on the bone. Hey, thanks for watching our review. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new reviews and features almost every day. Now here's the question I have for you. What regular job do you want to see in a video game? It can be a job that's already in a game, but maybe needs to be done a little bit better. Or perhaps it's a job that's never been in a game. It's up to you, so just let me see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we'll be back on Sunday with a new episode of Defunct Games News, followed next week by craziness. Seriously, it's going to be a full marathon of EGM and the launch games. It's kind of a big deal. If that sounds good to you, then I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.